And we're going to be doing 2 podcasts for the price of one today. And if you're listening for free, well, you still luck out. As for others, again, I am creating more content for the added incentive to contribute to this YouTube series. So I want to be a little bit more specific and in line with, some of the things that people are seeking, but I'm not an expert and I don't know everything. And every year I learn more than I learned the year prior. So I will never describe myself as a survival expert in the same way that Jordan Maxwell has described himself as a ordinary individual, in search of or with an interest in extraordinary information. In my own way, I'm sharing from my personal life stories and experiences what things are really like. So let's talk about off-grid living. Let's talk about survival preparedness. Let's talk about urban. Let's talk about rural. I don't know everything, but there's certainly a number of dots that I think that I can cover. At the very basic, you should already know the food that you should have on store, and that it's more important that you know your own diet than to simply just stock up on what someone tells you to stock up on. There might be an allergy. You may respond more positively to certain grains, seeds, whole foods than others. It could be possible, I'm not really sure, that my genetic code responds in a more positive manner to something like quinoa as opposed to someone else. I also know that my body does not respond very well to alcohol. And even when I am drinking, I prefer to drink, say, a real beer like an IPA as opposed to a Budweiser or a PBR. Beers that I actually consider to be toxic. Now, let's apply this to food. So someone should have already some experience. If you haven't had any experience at all living without conventional electricity, if you haven't had any experience at all being in the same place for several weeks with, the basics that you need to really get a grasp of, how long you can go without meat, which is indefinite, of course. It is a matter of getting used to not eating meat, I'm only eating meat, by the way, bacon with my eggs and things like that when I'm going to town and I'm bringing those things back. And this social, practical, self-test, whatever you want to call it, drill, spirit quest, it's really many things under one umbrella, but it's when you leave a major city or suburban area where, at a situation where you have a nice car or a decent car, we can get in and out, and you have a driveway with gravel. It's not just going to turn into a mud pit like mine is now. So when you're in a situation where you can't go anywhere but you have just enough, you're in a better situation to know what you need. Now, this is not my first dance. This is not my first ride. In fact, things are just a little bit better than they were in the past when I was at the same place for an extended period of time in the winter. And in the current structure that I'm in, I am able to get away with using a Mr. Buddy heater, which is approximately 10 inches away from the microphone in which I'm using right now. And so, as long as I have the heater close to me, I can get by with something like that. We're at probably about 7,700 feet. There are no issues using the Mr. Buddy heater. Sometimes I have to light it with a manual lighter after I press the button if the pilot light doesn't light. Other than that, I've had no issues, and I've been using it for several years. So I have no interest in hearing those urban non-survivalists read reviews off the internet or other things that are giving them a false understanding of what's going on. Always be aware of where you get your information from and whether it's accurate or not. And there may be people around you or in your life that don't know very much about what it takes to live outside the grid. That may be providing their own 2 cents, and it may be based on fear and not experience. Fear of death. Oh no, don't do that. I've read, without even knowing about some of these products, having a manual, safe shut-off option in case the oxygen levels, in a certain area drop. There are certain propane products and stoves that are directly labeled as products that you do not want to use inside. And of course, you're going to see companies that could be held liable put out certain messages. And it is true that there are issues regarding oxygen. But if you have a certain amount of ventilation that is natural, the RV, for example, much more ventilation and much less insulated than the shed that I'm in now. So in that case, there was never any concern about a lack of oxygen. The greater concern was, geez, how can I warm up? This RV is really, really cold. And I survived in Costilla County, in the San Luis Valley, in Alamosa County last winter, which is one of the coldest places in North America. So I've demonstrated to you, the audience, that I've used a Mr. Buddy heater, which costs about $80 in some areas in North America, perhaps outside of the city that you're living in, if you're in a major dense population center, also known as a Target. But if you live in a more rural part of North America, you'll find that the cost of propane is like a third, or 1/4, a quarter, if you will, than what it is in the city that you're in, or maybe half. I'm not sure. But what I can say is I've taken like 4 of those so-called 20-pound propane containers, and I've gotten them filled, and the bill's been about $38, $40. So it's like less than 10. It's actually gone down. It's actually slightly cheaper here than it is apparently in Alamosa. It even will vary. That's right. Within a state like Colorado itself, the cost of the propane will vary. So I've covered heating. You've seen some of the water containers, and there's ways you can siphon. Instead of having an electric pump, although those can be hooked up to inverters, and I've seen people pump water out of rivers in the past, not many times, but I've seen various versions of that, for people that are collecting their water into, say, a large container in the back of their truck, to, say, go back to their garden somewhere, transporting water, or maybe going, to a friend's well and filling up your barrels, and so how do you do that? A lot of people they think about people hauling water off the grid, and I don't know what they're envisioning, but there are people that are older. There are people that are disabled, either psychologically or physically, that are able to do certain things. So if they can do it, some of you, if you apply yourselves, and people get beyond the I don't want to get my hands dirty. Oh, off-grid's scary. Aren't they going to kill me out there? And the list goes on. You got to work on yourself first to get beyond the I can't do it for it, or you got to be willing. You got to be humble enough, or in a state of prayer to the Creator, to show you how to do it, or to lead you into the right circumstances or situations in which your learning and your experience can accelerate, so you can neutralize that fear of the unknown. And so I saw this guy use a couple hoses, and he literally siphoned from one container to another, stick the hose in a container and literally inhale, and then the water starts coming out. And then, of course, I think that he had the water in his truck, and the water that he was, once he got the siphon going, it was at a lower elevation, like on the ground. So he was going from one container or one barrel to another. There are the 55-gallon blue barrels. Then there's the ones that you've seen outside my cabin or my shed, the 15-gallon containers, which, of course, if you're strong enough, you can take those, the 7-gallon containers, with maybe a strong stick, and carry those on your back, if you're a Superman, for example. And it can really be good on the back to have a stick, or to have 2 people working together. Even 2 women, could be hauling water with each of them carrying an opposite end of the stick, or holding with the middle portion of the sticks, or maybe a metallic stick or something really, really strong, is in order to haul various water. So having various sizes of water containers is very important with regards to transport. So now, of course, we have these bike kits that are also out there. And if I had the extra income, for example, later on at some point, I'll look at that. And some way to haul water. So something basically attached to the back of the electric bike and having some sort of fuel storage. Of course, having some sort of electric bike or something that can be converted to electric, be it a bike or be it a vehicle. A lot of people talk big off grid. I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. And the reality is not everyone is actually capable of the things that they're bragging that they can do. Some of them are actually in a state of trying to learn how to do it, but they aren't actually close to say like a hydrogen generator yet. So this is still, I guess, in the early phases. People talking about going beyond gas and being all electric. And then there's different understandings of what the government might do to certain people selling certain products. I'm aware of certain things that are sold on the internet that have certain claims. I cannot stand behind how well they work. And I have a feeling some of you can, though, or may. And if you do live off the grid or have lived off the grid, or if you do have personal firsthand experience, and I don't mean just watching YouTube, I mean personal firsthand experience. That doesn't mean that you don't have knowledge if you're just watching YouTube, but a lot of people now are living through other people's lives, and they're living through the sharing of the link. And they're not actually living it themselves. They're living like a virtual reality version of it. You may not have the headset on yet. And it's great that these YouTube videos are to get people thinking. There's also a group of people out there that are living the off-grid lifestyle in their consciousness because there's a part of them that needs to connect with nature and wants to connect with other souls that are connecting with nature. That's why some of you are drawn to this channel. I'm not saying there's something wrong with that and that you're all living in a virtual reality. It's a stepping stone for some of you. It's filling a void that you don't have in your own life or in your own community. There may not be conversations like this on your TV, even if you have cable with 200 channels. That's the beauty of, by the way, of Access TV. And I want to thank everybody that is coming to this channel, that is listening, especially if you're an open-minded person and you like when I share from the heart. So, again, that's why I'm thinking about, well, how can I get a little bit more specific with regards to my off-grid advice. So we talked about the trial run, putting yourself in situations to where, you don't wait for an emergency. You go out and you do it. And then you take some of you really need to write stuff down on a piece of paper like me. The problem is, even though the pen is mightier than the sword, why can't I find my pens? Note to self. Buy more lighters, need more pens, need more tea light candles. Actually got some, they look like shot glasses. And what I do is I put the little cheap candles in there. And I get unscented candles, because I don't want to smell that toxic burn off of that artificial fruit. The real natural candles where the burn off is natural, those aren't cheap. I love some of that right now. Perhaps some of the things that you burn that leave off a nice, pleasant smell. But I'll tell you what, just on a short note, I've noticed that I feel cleaner in mind, body, and spirit in natural areas as opposed to being in an urban environment. And in an urban environment, because we're transmitting and receiving not just on a energy consciousness level, but our bodies seem to act like sponges, whether we like it or not. Yeah, we may have a part in the changing of the air quality itself. Human beings breathing in polluted water or breathing in polluted air and then breathing out something that actually is much more balanced than the air that went in. Of course, we're taught to view ourselves as viruses, and we're taught many negative things about ourselves as human beings by design. And I would say that there are many positive things about our breath and spirit. So when it comes to hygiene is important. There are books that women could read that specialize in off-grid hygiene for women and the needs of women. Obviously, the needs of men are slightly less. Not smelling like some sort of a gorilla, however, is going to continue to be, nothing wrong with gorillas per se, just using that, or smelling like a wet dog. Okay? And it can be difficult with limited water to keep clean. But as I just said, living outside of a major city and living at a higher elevation and having a cleaner diet and drinking more water, and of course smoking less cigarettes, the less toxins that you're putting in your body, the least toxins, including human waste, for example, that are released from the body. And on that topic, it's also widely assumed that people are polluting the earth by managing their human waste, by people that aren't actually living that lifestyle. And so there is a way to build your own compost toilet, and there is information you can get on YouTube. And then there's the more modern way, which is more likely by some counties to be acceptable, where they may turn their nose up at a concrete or a compost toilet system where it's dug 6 feet into the ground. There are other forms of compost toilets to where it's inside and it's in a compost toilet that you buy off the internet. In some cases, it's several $1,000s. Then there are some on Amazon for about $500. And you can incorporate that with some sort of a barrel to where you mix it. And then there's peat moss and other things that you mix, natural materials that you mix with said human waste. And I have not done it before, but there are ways to use that human waste. I know it sounds disgusting, but the way you look at things when you're out in nature are much different than the ways that you may have been accustomed to looking at things from inside the box of the city or your apartment right now, where you flush the toilet and it all goes into this massive, giant blah. And yeah, in some major cities, they're actually mining human waste for minerals like gold and whatnot. Believe it or not, there are trace minerals in human waste, especially if that person is, especially when it comes to the urine, especially if they're in an area where they're recycling the wastewater into the drinking water. Then you have traces on a molecular level of drugs and antidepressants and other things that have found their way into the system of people that aren't deliberately taking those drugs. Reason to go off grid number 15352-P. So, the reality is you can use not only horse manure, but human manure to enhance a garden. So going to the next thing, a lot of people are just not caught up with accurate information because their minds have been influenced in some negative ways by the internet. Instead of this internet being used to educate people, there's a mind control aspect of the internet. And so when it comes to off-grid politics, to keep it there, some people are under the false notion that it's illegal to live off-grid everywhere at the same time. Even one person that watches this channel was under the false notion that you were not allowed to collect rain from the sky. The thing is, people need to get out of a mindset that everything is collapsing and going into absolute tyranny everywhere at the same speed. Because things are cyclical, and we go through periods of people seemingly waking up and going to sleep. Sometimes you see victories in a world where somewhere else, thousands of miles away, they're going into tyranny. Now in the state of Colorado, you can harvest rainwater. And that rainwater, especially in certain areas where we are less affected by the geoengineering than the major U.S. cities, than even the San Luis Valley, 3 to 4 hours away to the east. There's more geoengineering than I've ever seen before, as well as Taos, causing some locals that are aware of geoengineering to think that they are doing something for a very specific reason in that area. Of course, they do certain things in certain areas also to maintain a larger national weather modification program. It may not necessarily be done with a plan to harm the people that live in that area, but to engage in terraforming and geoengineering in certain areas because of the path of the jet stream, because of its impact on other areas. And so because of that, they may do some geoengineering in certain areas like the area I'm in now, but you may notice if you stay in a certain area for a prolonged period of time, more natural, real blue skies. The realest blue skies that you've ever seen in your life with what's possible with a national, international geoprogramming going on. But to say that it's the same everywhere is to be full of shit. Or to be promoting an understanding because you haven't seen anywhere where there seems to be a break in the program. There are breaks in the program, but they're getting less and less and less as the years go on. So this area is not without a geoengineering program, but this area has more natural, rich blue skies than many other places. And there's going to be less geoengineering, of course, during ongoing heavy storms, snowstorms, rainstorms. If anything, that snow and that rain is, and I'm just speculating, potentially more pure and healthier than rain that may fall during other seasons than the season we're in now, say spring, summer, and fall, where there may have been some chemicals left behind in the air from the geoengineering. But when you have days of inactivity, geoengineering in certain areas during certain seasons, you're going to have layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, just like it's been raining the last day, of rain washing whatever chemical residue from a few days ago or a few weeks ago away, meaning the collection of this water is far higher in quality than other places. And so it's not illegal to dig your own reservoir. It's what they crack down on in some areas, especially other places, is the size of the reservoir. And I may not agree with it. You may not agree with it. It's important that you know that what's happening in Costilla County with code enforcement agents trespassing on private property, that is not happening everywhere in America. And that's why I was upset about Costilla County. The reason it's not happening everywhere in America is because what they did in Costilla County was illegal. And other counties know that it's immoral and illegal. And so other counties without a race agenda, like Costilla County, other counties without a race agenda or a classist agenda, they're not doing what Costilla County did illegally. And so when people see counties kick people off their property signing land use codes, oftentimes people just assume that they are going to go to jail if they fight the system and put their foot down. And the reality is people have put their foot down in other counties and other areas, and the counties stopped what they were doing. They may have allowed their land use county, website to continue to say the same thing. This is not allowed. This is not allowed. Got to be a big time baller, yo. $30,000 septic. Woohoo! Yeah, getting wealthy with the off-grid. And their websites will all say you have to have a septic. Not all counties are actually engaging in illegal and immoral activities regarding removing people off their land. The reason why those regulations are finding their way to website after website for county after county is because of the pressure from the federal and state government, in particular the state. And one person's interpretation was the state is the county, which I don't really understand. But his understanding of it was a interlinking between the policies of the county and the state based on some other policies, like a plumbing board and other things. And so when it comes to living off the grid, there are the realities of it, of the challenges that you face. And then there are things that people think are going to be the big challenges. And listen, hauling my own water is the least of my concerns. One person dealing with their own human waste is the least of my concerns. There are other things that are like the least of my concerns. And I'm actually in a safe area where I am not afraid of my neighbors. There are all these people that are afraid of, meth dealers. And off-grid and meth has become synonymous because some people that have made meth have gone off grid. And so, there's this whole, from people that live in the grid or just outside of off grid areas that rent natural areas, but they're not off grid. They have certain stereotypes, even in Colorado, about how they view people that want to be left alone. Well, why do you want to be left alone? Really makes you wonder why some people want to live on the verge of town. Now we know. And when some people read about meth bus, that's really how they view reality. And a lot of Colorado residents have viewed all immigration into the state as being immigration into the state coming from the legalization of marijuana, completely omitting in the minds of many what's really happening in other places in America with regards to the price of rent and the standard of living. Of course, we remember pieces of wisdom that have found their way into our civilization, like one man's treasure is another man's gold. And so when it comes to being left alone and being able to live off grid, that level of freedom is like having gold in your hand. It's probably a poor comparison because it's not really the same thing, but it is something of great value for those that have never had that kind of freedom before. And so when you're able to have that kind of freedom, going to town or going down the hill for water every few weeks, or even less if you get larger containers and you get organized with it with a hose system. And so later when I get a pickup truck and I can leave my RV on this property, I'll be bringing more and more water per trip. Not even to town, there's a place to get water several miles away. You put in a few quarters and the thing just explodes. You actually got to get an adapter for the actual area in which the water comes out of to literally take a mass of water that's like pumping like so many gallons per second or minute and put it in the containers. And so people just assume that you can't do it, that you're not allowed to do it, that people aren't doing it. And the reality is you have people doing it all over this country, but they don't do off-grid media. They don't do access TV shows. You could say I'm either the only one or one of the few, but no one is linking in the comment section the other off-grid independent media people. I don't just mean people showing off the RV. I mean people that are speaking in depth about current issues in the United States. It's so sad that there are people that have considered themselves off-gridders or lovers of freedom that have been using their YouTube channel to promote Donald Trump. I mean a deep level of sharing regarding the freedom movement and the frugal path. They're out there, male and female, but they're very, very few. And a part of it has to do with we have only recently seen this major shift to go off grid as part of like a survival preparedness plan or a way to save oneself from being infected by the influence of society, to put it nicely, right? And we've only had YouTube around since 2006. That was 10 years ago. So the idea of social media, vlogging, even video on demand, if you look at what's going on with YouTube, a lot of YouTubers with large audiences are sustaining themselves by their listeners supporting the artist or speaker directly outside of PayPal, outside of YouTube. So we have Patreon, and we also have on-demand video channels, where people can do their own Netflix thing. And some people literally are talented enough. Their material is good enough. Some of them have editing teams, and they have their own businesses based on their own independent free media. And so it's important to understand that this is all an evolution. Okay, not only independent media, but describing the off-grid path using independent media. Whereas prior it was books, it was VHS tapes of various quality with usually a price tag of $40. And it usually was about something specific like how to skin a deer or, wilderness survival skills, how to blow a whistle. Okay, well, thanks, Butch. Well, is that what that plan is? Wow, I'll just... But then there's the other aspect of off-grid tips. Basic, practical, this stuff's a little bit more important. You may want to be 100% self-sufficient and want to be like an Indian and do a little, you're going to take two hands and rub a stick together. And there's a lot of in the gridders that will put down off gridders going, you're not off grid. You got yourself some internet and technology. And that's what they do. And that's what they do. Excuse me, early in the morning here, 5:40. That's exactly what they do. They laugh at those that are doing something that they themselves are not doing. So I'm going to stop things now. I'm going to come back with another podcast. It takes me great restraint to stop myself from speaking, but this is just going to be a continuation of sharing, providing energy and insight, illuminating the realities of living off grid. As I've said and posted before, one of the most important pieces of advice that I can give anyone is to go in a more low-key direction, which I have in this county. I'm doing videos here. I'm not doing videos here and sharing them with locals. My only connection with other locals has been buying and trading used items. More so buying with cash on my end, items that I found that I need for the winter. And that's about it. Because this is not a demographic or area in which there is any support for the things that I'm talking about. I actually had a mentally disturbed person on the property several weeks ago screaming that the archons had me as he shoved his palm in a black magic sorcerer, witch on the mountain manner. Actually a week earlier, the guy was like, you know what, I sense the spirits around you and I could possess you if I wanted to. So you could say that I've been scared straight more than once with regards to my interactions with off-gridders. So the most important piece of advice that I can give you is to override your own loneliness and sense of desire to be a part of a community and understand that you can take the person out of Babylon. Oftentimes, you cannot take the judgment out of that person that has maintained their Babylonian consciousness. And so if you're an independent thinker, if you're anything like me and you talk about openly, you don't hide, you share who you are, your soul on your sleeve, literally. Well, if you're anything like me, people are going to attack that with the first etheric crossbow that they can find. And that is just how it is. And so as long as I am on this path, and as long as I am speaking about certain things, and now we're going way outside the box of off-grid stuff, and we're talking about spiritual warfare, for me to remain safe living off the grid. And of course, there's no guarantee that I will be 100% safe. There may be people out there that later want to take a shot at me. But the point of the matter is that in order to be safe for today, as long as the Creator gives me one day at a time to speak my truth to you, I have to use greater discretion than the average off-gridder. I have to be even more responsible than the average female, male, human being when it comes to people coming to my residence or things of that nature. And so we'll be back, folks, with more off-grid advice in a podcast version. It is November 22nd, 2016.